You know what rejection does? It slams the door, but it also reveals that you were never meant to fit there. It shows you what you're not. It shows you what you're not. But more than that, it whispers what you could become. It's not the end, it's a corridor leading to a room they never imagined you'd walk into. And once you're in, you don't knock, you don't explain, you just stand. And the silence says everything they need to hear. You don't need to shout. You don't need to convince. Because what they don't expect will shake them more than anything you ever said. And that begins now. The sweet, they thought it broke you. The silence, the look, the moment they turned away. But it didn't. It awakened something. Not anger, not revenge. Focus. Because rejection doesn't define you, it defines them. Their limits, their fear, their inability to see what was growing in you. And now, you don't want their approval. You want distance. Not to prove a point, but to become the kind of presence that no longer fits in their version of the world. Because rejection is feedback, not about who you are, but about who they can't imagine you becoming. And that gap, that's where you build. Quietly, slowly, deliberately. Until one day, the version they dismissed becomes the version they fear. Not because you returned louder, but because you returned. You said nothing, and that's what shook them most, because they expected a reaction, anger, desperation, a plea, but you gave them silence. Not emptiness, intention, because silence isn't weakness, it's control. It doesn't chase, it makes them question. Why isn't he fighting back? What is he thinking? Did we misjudge him? And that's power, the kind that doesn't shout, doesn't explain, doesn't justify. It just stands, still, cold, certain. Silence forces people to sit with their own doubts. It doesn't give them closure. It gives them a mirror. And the longer you hold it, the more they begin to hear themselves, louder than anything you could have said. That's how you win without a word. You let your absence speak with more precision than their attack ever did. You left. No message, no explanation, no sound. And that was the move. Because when people expect noise, absence feels like thunder. They don't know where you went, they don't know what you're planning, and uncertainty is a weapon. Most fight with words, with arguments, with emotion. But you disappear. Not to hide, to reset, to let the silence do the watching, to let the distance do the speaking. Because when you vanish on purpose, they start rewriting the story themselves. Did we go too far? Was he stronger than we thought? Why do I still feel him? Here, no trace, no closure, no weakness. That's not running away. That's strategy. It's what happens when you stop responding to their world and start building one they can't reach. You didn't say, "I'm changing." You just changed. No status, no caption, no speech. Just new eyes, new walk, new silence. Because real transformation doesn't need witnesses. It doesn't need to be shared. It just becomes undeniable. People notice, but they can't explain. Something's different. He feels heavier. Why does he make me nervous now? It's not your words. It's your presence. Your pace is slower. Your gaze holds longer. Your answers are fewer. And the old you no longer arrives. Because you didn't upgrade, you replaced. Every habit, every reaction, every soft corner they used to push, gone. You didn't evolve to impress them. You evolved so they'd never be able to put you in the same box again. You're calm now, and that bothers them more than your rage ever did, because they expected fire, expected pushback, expected noise. But what they got was stillness. And then nothing is more unsettling than a man who no longer reacts. They talk, you blink, they provoke, you breathe, they push, you don't move. Not because you're weak, but because you're beyond the game. Your peace is no longer passive. It's deliberate. It's not avoidance, it's authority. Because when you no longer need to win the moment, you begin to own the room. Not by raising your voice, but by lowering your need. And that shift, that's what they feel. Even if they don't understand it, they sense it. And the more silent you get, the louder their doubt becomes. The magnetic absence. You're gone, but somehow you're still there. In conversations you're not part of, in glances when your name comes up, in the pauses they can't explain. Because absence, when intentional, becomes presence. Not loud, but looming. You didn't leave in weakness, you withdrew with force. And what you left behind wasn't confusion, it was impact. They can't replace you, they can't forget you, they can't figure out how someone so quiet became so heavy. And now, they replay the moments, they question the silence, they notice what's not there. You didn't burn bridges, you became a shadow. Not haunting them with anger, but with possibility. The what if of who you've become, the maybe of what they missed. And in that space, you're not a person anymore. You're a presence that refuses to fade. You don't hate them. You don't love them either. You just don't need them. That's not bitterness, that's freedom. Because true indifference isn't cold. It's clear. It's not the absence of emotion. It's the absence of attachment. No more hoping they'll notice. No more waiting for them to see your value. You've already seen it, and that's all that matters. They could apologize. They could return. It wouldn't change anything. Not because you're angry, but because you're untouchable now. Not above, not below, just unreachable. You're not avoiding the past, you're just no longer orbiting it. And the peace you carry, it's not quiet, it's untethered. And when they try to pull you back, there's nothing left to grab, because the person they knew no longer exists, and the one you've become doesn't need to be understood. He just is. They controlled you, not with chains, but with thoughts, by making you question yourself, by planting seeds of doubt, by watching you shrink without saying a word, and for a while you let them. Not because you were weak, but because you never realized you had a choice. But now, you do. You own the voice, the one inside. And that changes everything, because once you control your mind, they lose access. They can mock, they can guess, they can speak your name, but they can't shape your actions. You decide what matters, you decide what stays. And the noise, it keeps talking, but it no longer arrives. Because self-control isn't about discipline alone, it's about ownership. And when the mind is yours again, so is your life. You walk in, no words, no glance, no signal, but suddenly, the room shifts. They remember the silence, they remember the distance, they remember how you left without flinching, and now you're here. Different, not louder, not sharper, just whole. And that's what unravels them. Because you don't demand attention, you command it, by being still, by being certain, by being unshaken. They don't see the man they rejected, they see the proof that they were wrong. Your presence, it doesn't seek recognition, it causes reflection in them. They don't say it out loud, but it shows in their eyes, in their posture, in the way they shift, like the floor just moved. You became a question mark in the shape of a person. And no one walks away from that, unchanged. You're calm, but not the kind that comforts, the kind that confuses, because they don't know what it means. When a man no longer reacts, no longer tries, no longer explains, you sit, you breathe, you observe, and the more quiet you get, the more chaotic they become. Because this calm, it's not peace, it's power. The kind built in storms, refined in rejection, forged in absence, and now it rests behind your eyes. Still, composed, untroubled. They expected anger, they expected a version of you they could engage with. But you're not engaging, you're done. Not with them, with the need to be understood. And that's what shakes them. Because when nothing gets to you, they can't get to you either. And that calm, it's louder than any storm. You're not loud, you're not seen, but you're felt, in decisions made around you, in silence that thickens when you walk in the weight people carry when you say nothing, because power doesn't always arrive with noise. Sometimes it slips in without form, without announcement, without demand, without explanation, just presence, measured, composed, unyielding. They don't know what changed, only that they act different around you. Words come slower, eyes look shorter, conversations bend, not because you're trying, but because you no longer need to try. You've become something else, not a person, a standard. And now, they don't just remember you, they adjust to you. And that is what real power feels like. Not force, but gravity. You never fought back. You never asked for it. But now, they look at you differently. Not with guilt, not with praise, with uncertainty. Because what stands before them isn't the version they rejected. It's what came after, still, silent, untouched. And in that silence, they don't hear regret. They hear the one thing they never expected. Respect.